Welcome back, everybody. This is Dr. Anthony Chang again, and I'm very, very excited about this session because this is when we bring it all back for our attendees, and we had the fortune of having really strong moderators and chairs for the tracks. I believe I've had the pleasure of meeting just about everyone except Raj. So we're going to start conveniently based on my Zoom picture here. And what we're going to do is ask each chair to share with us one takeaway, one surprise, one insight that they think they like to leave everyone. And then we'll rotate 3 times, 2 or 3 times, depending on how we're doing on time. All right. So the rest of the chairs, we could think of the one big takeaway first, and then we'll go right on down the line. So Robert, you're the chair of the ICU sector, which has been pretty mature in terms of work. And what did you take away today? And what do you think you ought to leave everyone with today?
Well, first of all, thank you, Anthony, for organizing this this series of talks. I think it's certainly been a learning experience for me, and I think it's for many others. The idea of leveraging AI to advance medicine, I think, is obviously what this is all about. And I think you've been such a leader in this field, really pushing the agenda. And I think we've reached a place today where we are really beginning to understand a lot about AI and what we can do. So in terms of the sessions today on anesthesiology, intensive care, emergency care, the takeaway for me is really about the the very data intensive, data rich, high dimensional environment that people like myself, my colleagues live in. And I think the focus on this area has really intensified with the COVID-19 pandemic. Maybe a few years ago, a lot of people didn't really know what intensive care was outside of, of course, medicine, medical fields. Today, I think there's a much greater appreciation for what happens in the emergency rooms and also in the intensive care unit. And if there's one defining feature, I think, of intensive care, no matter where it's applied, is that it is very data rich, data intensive, and overwhelmingly so. So there is this almost like a sort of curse of dimensionality, which is intrinsic to what we do. And so there is a massive opportunity to really leverage AI in this field. We're only at the very beginning of this. And I think what this was illustrated in several of the talks that we had today, the ability to break down very complex data-rich problems into tractable elements, I think can only happen with the use of a combination of access to the high dimensional data, together with, of course, machine learning, and together with the strong, biological insights and clinical intuitions that I think people, who work in this field are able to bring. So this convergence of, again, domain expertise with machine learning, with the data, is very, very powerful. However, I think another lesson that we've learned, in this area is that there's high potential for this to go awry. One of the areas that was discussed today, which I thought was really interesting, was the inherent intrinsic biases that it can emerge very, very quickly with machine learning algorithms, and sometimes even imperceptibly. And I think as experts or as people who are interested in this field, we need to be highly attentive and really think about methodologies to constrain bias and avoid potential complications associated with leveraging of AI. Another area that I guess another
Robert,
takeaway that
Robert, do you mind if we just go to another speaker and save that last one?
Yeah, sure, no worries. We can
next
keep
round.
going.
But first of all, thank you for the kind comment. I'm simply a convener of all the stars that we see here today, and thankful that all of you come when we call you. But I think the point's well taken that we have this pandemic really amplified the need for, particularly ICU, your sector, to really make good use of the data and not be lost in the data, right? Because it's easy to get lost in all that data. We have to be smart about the use of data. So, just want to take this moment also to pay tribute to all of you that are have been on the front lines and make such a huge difference for particularly younger generation of clinicians that are in training and in education right now. So Raj, how about the GI sector? It's been so good to see more activity in gastroenterology that started off, I think, with the image-related endoscopy use of deep learning, but certainly now kind of going into other sectors in gastroenterology as well. So welcome. Tell us what you gathered today as a lesson learned or something that you'd like to leave behind with everybody.
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. Thanks for holding this wonderful conference. Very insightful learning experience. So the key takeaway that I learned, we've all known that computer vision holds significant promise. In fact, out of the 10 or so randomized control trials, 6 or 7 were actually done in computer vision. The entire 10 that's done in medicine, in endoscopy. So it does hold a significant promise in detection and assessment of mucosal lesions. But what I really took away from today are the challenges and the barriers. Challenges in getting this very high resolution data into a place where models can be trained on, where algorithms can be trained on, and the need for wide and diverse data sets, and actually labeling problem. Especially GI endoscopy has so much inter-observer variability that the ground truth is so difficult to define. So how do we define ground truth, and how do we label and train these data sets? So the potential and the promise for computer vision is infinite, but the barriers are also significant, and it's actually relieving to see how much effort is going on to surmount these barriers. And as you said, though most of the work has been done on computer vision, it is easy to do work on that because there's significant corporate interest in computer vision. Where the other more traditional uses of prediction, like disease prognostication, survival prediction, and reducing diagnostic error, are also, we need to focus on those interests, those disciplines, which may not be that appealing to, corporate funding interests.
Yeah. Well, it comes down to what Robert was saying earlier. Yeah. We have a lot of data, but we need to make sense out of the data. And I think we need to get all the clinicians on board to share the burden, because too few are involved in doing too many things right now. And I know that was a theme in the surgical session as well, as how do you annotate the data. But I think, for instance, in my field of cardiology, there are 50,000 cardiologists in this country alone. If everyone just does a few, that's a lot of images we can have very, very good data for. So I think it's just getting more clinicians to be aware of the need and fulfill the need to everyone's benefit, particularly the patients. John, you were in the healthcare administration sector trying to also make a contribution here. What was your big takeaway today?
Yeah, thank you. So I would say that we have a mandate now in 2021 that AI has to create value and to prove value. And I look back, that we reflect a lot on 2020, probably for the rest of our lives. One of the conclusions is that all of the fat's been taken out of the budget. So where last year, or starting into last year, there was a lot of budget for doing cool things, for innovation, for AI and this was the topic that we had just concluded, AI as a science project, if you will. That luxury is gone. And what has to be done is AI has got to be applied to strategic initiatives and drive value right away. It has to be measurable. And in fact, the equation is flipped, where I don't think, and this is the takeaway, that we can't continue to drive strategic initiatives that don't have AI and the power of it embedded into what we're doing. I don't think that's a realization has come into the mainstream of our culture yet, but it must. And so that's a takeaway, is drive to value, and initiatives have to incorporate AI into it, or they'll fall short. And the ones that are using AI will be differentiated from those that are not.
just look at how most health systems and hospitals took such a long time just to make a simple pivot or two in terms of manpower and logistics, and it just too slow. Just a total display of the inadequacies in our system. And I'm not sure AI can solve all of it, but it certainly will be a major contributor in solving those issues.
Yeah,
Naila,
we're completely exposed.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, go.
Okay, Naila, good to see you. Naila, how are you?
Hi.
Good to see you again.
Hi, Anthony. Good to see you again.
So again, like gastroenterology, I'm so glad to see more activity in OBGYN.
Well, I'm the only geeky gynecologist who's been with you guys since your.
But I think it's a tribute to you and your field, because I think, like cardiology and other subspecialties, you have imaging, you have continuous data, you have complex patients. It's really, really well set up to benefit from accommodating AI. So tell us what was your big takeaway today?
Yes, first of all, a comment, and then I'll share what the findings or what were the main takeaways from today's session. That, if we talk about maternity, then there are clear pathway of a mother's journey. And at every point, right from the point before getting pregnant, and that is one of the areas we discussed about, assisted conception and the quality of the embryo, and how AI can really help in selecting or identifying where the best outcomes can be. Because like I say, we are all in this in the business of healthcare, that we can improve the outcomes for our patients. Let's not forget why we came into our profession. And these technology, the layers of complexity of technology, or I would say the ease by technology, is how you look at it. The glass is half full or half empty. It depends on how much engagement we get. So we had the 3 points that I was trying to sift through out of all the outcomes. One was the variability in clinical performance in gynecological complex gynae surgery, whether in my area, which is gynae cancer, or benign gynae, where endometriosis, you have level stage 4 type of patients with, just totally frozen pelvises, and the young women whose lives are agonized, and how these technological advances can help in making sure that there is least amount of complication per operatively. Then we also discussed in obstetrics the role of 3D ultrasound in fetal, identifying fetal well-being. And one of the challenges that I had posed to the panelists was that, since I've been looking into artificial intelligence, my dream is that we'll have an AI-based solution which will interpret the cardiotocograph, because so many decisions are made by wrong interpretation or varied interpretation of the CTG, which has an outcome, unfavorable outcome either on the mother or the child. And if we have that type of solution, we can remotely, like a hub and spoke model, help those areas where the midwife or a junior clinician is handling deliveries.
Yeah.
And another thing that came out was in assisted conception, the quality of the embryo and the best outcomes through assisted conception. So these were covered. And one of the thing, again, the same theme that was being discussed, the data, and how to make these algorithms be more credible and valid would be the more data you have, and that would be through sharing. And my personal take on this is that unless there is an international or a big governing information governance AI body that pushes these things forward and tries to simplify in layman's terms, because it's the unknown unknowns that people get scared of and they shy away from it.
But I think your point's well taken. I think sometimes we put too much emphasis on the AURLC of 0.98, 0.99. We're trying to push towards 1, which doesn't make sense to me. But we forget the biggest dividend and the fastest yield is going to be raising everyone's bar, right? On the bottom. There's so many misjudgments and mistakes made by human interpreters of signals or even clinical scenarios that we need to just get rid of the ones that we shouldn't be missing rather than always asking the machines to reach perfection as best they can. Babak, you and I have talked about all this for a couple of years now. Pre-COVID, we started talking. It feels like the pandemic's been half of our lifetime. But how do you? I mean, neuroscience is so fascinating when it comes to AI. Basically, just look at the brain, you can think of projects. So, what was a big takeaway for you today?
The big takeaway number one is your leadership. So you have been amazingly effective, pushing this, and I really thank you on behalf of our panel and on behalf of our Society for Brain Mapping and Therapeutics. Well, there were a couple of others I would share with you along the line of Dr. Kamal that she mentioned about a body pushing some of the policies. As you know, I was one of the advisors to Obama for Brain Initiative, and under Biden administration, we are pushing for an AI initiative. So for the Biden healthcare. And I think there's a great synergy here with all of us to basically come together and make sure that there are guidelines and guardrails put in place in terms of the ethics, in terms of how you collect data, how to disseminate data, and how do you share, and basically when you share that data. So these are the things that we have to pay attention to. But as you know, AI is not that new to neuroscience, because now we are working with the manufacturers, IBM and the national labs, to develop a brain-based computing. So there's a two-way, I would say, direction. What do we use in terms of the technology, but then what do we back to the technology developers? And also we talked about integration of different platforms with AI. AI by itself, is just a platform, but then you have the nano medicine, precision medicine, you have photonics and biophotonics, neurophotonics, emerging technologies. How do you actually integrate those, develop a new product that can actually help physicians? So that was kind of a conversation. How do we translate that?
Alan Turing says, I can only see a short distance ahead, but we have a long ways to go. But it's exciting. Well, decade's coming up, I think. Now, I was trained and worked as a cardiologist, but I'm almost envious of neurologists these days because of my interest in AI. But you'd be proud that I'm taking a course on computational neurosciences, and it just blows my mind in terms of the potential in the future. Todd?
That's because you need to take more courses there, Anthony. I think you should add on 10 more courses after that. You are not well trained enough. You don't really have much of an education. It's time you take some classes.
Keep up with my smart faculty. So Todd, what do you think? I really, some of the themes that we talked about already, annotating data for images, working together and sharing data. By the way, one of the, I don't know if you have seen the MIT issue on top 10 technologies for this year, but one of them is the concept of a federated data trust, which I think is hopefully coming for medicine, because then everyone will have a higher degree of incentive to participate. But how about the surgeons? It's so good to have the surgeons for the second or third time even, I think. So
it was great to have the surgeons, because if you remember, the biggest thing I noticed is what a groundswell of interest we're getting now from surgeons. When I first came, I think one or two of us, and that was it. And now I'm starting to see a whole lot more. I guess I would break it down this way. Just like what Raj was saying, similar to GI, surgery is a dexterous visual field. And so, we've all thought of these ideas that, oh, we can use computer vision and really identify things in the operating room. And today we saw it. Today we saw it's not just a dream, that we're seeing stuff that's actually happening. And with the robot that we already have that allows a surgeon to teleoperate, now you can actually insert some intelligence into the robot, and now we're getting somewhere. So that was exciting. It was interesting to see the concept of people using machine learning to improve the efficiencies of the operating room. Interesting to see people talk about using it for diagnostics, similar to other specialties. I think the big question I have, and Anthony, I ask it to you all the time, I don't get the role of the surgeon. Does that mean that the surgeons are going to be the researchers doing this, or are we going to be having to make sure we keep our eyes open to the technology on the horizon and start incorporating it into our practice? That's what I wonder. But it was a phenomenal discussion.
No, it really was. I like the discussion, particularly about, should we have a robot examine the patient also?
Right.
Then the surgeon can just stay in bed, right, all night long.
Right.
The thing is, I think you're going to be, you have job security, Todd. I wouldn't worry about you as a surgeon, because you know what? The more sophisticated robots doing what you do are too expensive. You're much cheaper than these robots. Yeah. That's why you're going to be around for a long time. It's just gimmicks, because that's why they probably won't be replacing some human dominant jobs like housekeeping and all of these. It's just, to get a robot to that level of sophistication is too expensive in development as well as manufacturing those robots.
Doesn't price drop every year by half, and then we're eventually going to get to
that's Moore's law, which is the technology part, but putting all the technological pieces together is the hard part. And there's the Moravec's law, right? Whatever is easy for us is very difficult for a robot. So you doing an appendectomy is very straightforward, but for a robot that is extremely challenging, and we probably won't see that for a couple of decades, at least. But something very difficult for us is relatively simple for the robot. Looking at massive data sets and everything else. So I think of all of us, you might have the best job security.
What's up?
You're all mostly procedure oriented, so you can rest easy at night. No one's going to replace you for a long time. So I promise Robert I will come back to him for one more takeaway, and then in the last 10-15 minutes we'll just open it up for a big group discussion. We have amazingly smart people here. So Robert, any other takeaway that you got from your session?
Yeah, no, so I think the other piece was in regards to the value proposition, right? So if we want to convince health systems, universities, corporations to integrate AI and medicine, I think the key is making this a very strong value proposition. And I think the question is, how do we achieve goals such as patient safety, quality, augmenting the patient experience, improving performance of clinicians using AI. I think it's not as easy as it sounds, and there was a very robust discussion around this question of promoting these domains with the help of AI. I see AI. I think it was maybe Babak who mentioned this as a tool. It's a tool that allows us to achieve great things. One of the ones that I think is probably the most most valuable domain for AI is in promoting personalized or precision medicine. And I think there's a very strong convergence between those two fields. I believe that and as I mentioned in my introduction, I think there is also a convergence between the aims of precision medicine and the aims of quality in healthcare. So I think the future is bright, but there are a number of real challenges, and probably the biggest one is the implementation, and leveraging implementation science to really make this happen. I think is.
I see a potential danger in the next few years in hopefully a mild AI winter, when some of the expected delivery of the dividends isn't going to be there at the level that investors will like. And then we're going to have to go through that period. But I think 10 years from now, we'll look back and say, we were just talking relatively simple things back then, and look what we're doing now. So I'm pretty sure that's going to come, but we have to be very patient and persist through, I think, not a difficult period, but a challenging period. So one of the themes that almost all of your sessions talked about was just pulling data, getting data together. And in each of your subspecialties, what are some obstacles in your particular subspecialty when you talk to your colleagues about AI and adoption and getting data together? What's been some of the comments that you've heard from your colleagues? Anybody?
If you'd like me, I can go and address that. So there are two levels of commonness. One set of colleagues are those who are still in primitive dark ages using the computer with one finger. So with them, the conversation is artificial intelligence does not mean that, clinicians are brainless and the machines are making decisions on their own. So very basic type of discussions. While as on the other hand, you have that level of conversation with those who are already knowledgeable, who know what artificial intelligence is and its potentials, and they're worried about the regulations, the what do you call cybersecurity side of artificial intelligence, and they want to see more visibility of an ethics, regulatory body that is controlling or that is overseeing whatever is coming out. So there is a kind of, like I said, scare or uncertainty of the unknown unknowns.
Yeah.
Those are the two type of things that.
How about you, Todd? I'm going to pick on the surgeons because I can usually tell the level of interest in subspecialty by the size of room I'm invited to speak in. So I think I've graduated to some junior ballrooms in surgical subspecialties instead of a breakout panel somewhere remote from the ballroom. Now it's junior size ballrooms typically. So I think the interest or the curiosity is there. But I totally guessed wrong about the surgeons. I would have thought they're very into tech, that they would have gotten on this a little bit sooner, right behind the cardiologists and the ICU doctors. But why do you think there's still a little bit of a delay?
So right now, as we've heard from everyone else, the most palpable, immediate, tangible use of AI right now is in those areas where you gather the most data, and in surgery. So that's going to be in critical care, as was mentioned. In surgery, we don't have all that except for maybe images. And that is going to be, now we do have all the data of the patient, but that's no different than anyone else's data. That's, that's Epic data or data that's gathered in the system. But as far as visual data, that is so hard to know how to wrap our heads around how that's going to be cultivated and also shared. Our hospital in Cincinnati Children's, man, they're not having it. There's no way I can share any of that data, any of those images. So we're very risk averse, and I've been hitting roadblock after roadblock.
But sometimes I think the presumed barrier to entry is a little bit too high. I think just having more awareness of the statistics and machine learning for some of your patient data can yield a lot of insights that I think we're not getting the low-hanging fruits. We're just always shooting for that bright shining star at the top of the tree, and I think we need to lower our threshold in terms of just what's available and what can be done fairly easily. I think just raising everyone's baseline is good. Yeah,
you're totally right. Baby steps. But I will tell you, Anthony, we did have you as a consultant, sort of, but right during COVID hit, so we have to try again. I think that's going to be the key. It's going to be people like you going around and telling the story and letting the hospitals see what's going on, getting a big picture from people outside of their organization that has a much more compelling story, that we start getting on the same page and bringing all the institutions together. But individually, it's going to be impossible.
Yeah. The other theme was the importance of humans working closer with machines and data scientists, and I do agree with that. I think hopefully that will attract the clinicians back into this domain that we've been a little bit left out in the early part of the last decade in this area. So I think I'm excited about that, getting more clinicians involved, because I think we're starting to peak on the yield of deep learning and machine learning. We need to really have some clinical insights into this. And we think about how a child learns, right? He or she doesn't need to look at a million cats to know that a cat is around the corner. So how do we capture that sort of amazing human talent to the machine? And someone pointed out that
it's called unsupervised learning.
Yeah, it's also evolution, right? It took a billion years for the human brain to be able to quickly recognize a cat, probably back in our Neanderthal years of running away from saber-toothed tigers. So but that has to be somehow embedded into a computer to enable it to learn faster.
Of neuromorphic computing.
Yeah, that's right. Spoken like a true neurologist. But I think we're gonna see things like that in our lifetime. More facilitated, more neurological, or I should say, cognitive aspects of deep learning. And they're already talking about it because they already think that using brute computational power is not going to get us too much farther. So we need to be a little bit more creative. All right, so we have 8 minutes. There's 6 of you. A last minute before tomorrow, a last minute sort of message or lesson for our listeners. We'll go the other way this time. Naila?
Hi. Yeah, my main message would be both towards, first of all, the people that I saw and I was moderating the panels who were there, the tremendous amount of work that is going on. And it is humbling for me, the geeky gynecologist, to be able to share the platform with some of the, the greats who are doing this work. I'm sure in the future, when we see textbooks, we'll know the names. But my main request to everyone is that while we climb the ladder of greatness in technology and being in the Guinness textbook of innovation, we shouldn't forget that there are many people who are lacking basic healthcare. Yeah. And that if our technology can somehow mitigate those challenges, I'm doing a small project in Yemen and in rural parts of Pakistan where telehealth is being used, and we are challenged to save mothers' lives just because of the lack of basic technology.
Yeah.
So if we can,
I think the AI projects has to have some mandate to be involved in global health and health basic care. And I think we're seeing more and more projects in that area, so it's very encouraging. Babak?
Well, in neurosurgery, as you know, the AI has been really on the forefront in the last several years. So I think there's a different layers of AI, machine learning, and neuromorphic computing we can use to address the cost reduction, healthcare efficiency, and better delivery of care and precision-guided, treatment. Yeah. So some of the issues that we see, as our colleague Todd mentioned, some of the pushback that Todd gets, from my own experience in the hospitals, is not necessarily against the AI machine learning data sharing, is fund allocation from the CEOs, VPs down to provide capabilities. So today we talked with Dr. Laura Gihai and Eric Iskiglu about how we can actually not only educate our executives and ourselves, but also how do you actually talk to the trustees to provide resources to buy that supercomputer, adjust your computing capabilities, because those things had nothing to do with the surgical suites.
Yeah.
It has something to do with the computing capabilities of the medical center, and which is always afterthought.
I think sometimes you try to present the C-suite with projects that are not clinical that will have a good return and automate some of the processes in the hospital, and maybe not even call it AI. If you don't call it AI, maybe it'll be less intimidating. But the good news is that,
or you could argue from the kind of a cost effectiveness.
Yeah.
If you can reduce the cost, increase efficiency,
yeah.
and basically provide precision guided treatment.
Yeah.
So those are the words that rings the bell with the.
The good news is that the majority of them actually want to invest now, particularly after the pandemic. So this timing is good. Todd, any last words of wisdom from your?
No other last words. I think, we pretty much heard everything here. We get the point. We need to keep having these types of meetings. These are critical to have, not just once a year, but throughout the year. Start creating interest groups so people can come together. We are not going to be solving this as an island. We need to share each other's experience and hear about what other hospitals are doing, because by ourselves, we're not going to make this happen. So this for me was a great way to connect with other people around the world.
Probably one of the dividends of the pandemic is to reset everyone's innovation mindset. Raj, how about from gastroenterology? Great to have you as part of the subspecialties now in AI. Any last?
Thank you. Yeah, so I have two comments. One, the potential is amazing, but it's also important to be purposeful and temper our enthusiasm. Otherwise, credibility will be at stake. Learn from past failures like CAD and mammogram, and how technology didn't help us as expected with EHRs. And then take these learnings and move forward slowly and purposefully.
Yeah.
So that's.
I think it's a 25-year journey. So we should pace ourselves, right? John?
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. I want to reflect back on your question around the data and leave folks with this. Our paradigm is still, to me, the misperception that we have to have complete and completely accurate data in order to use it for artificial intelligence is confusing to me. I mean, our paradigm is that we have to peel the orange in order to count the seeds inside of it. AI done properly will be able to see through the data and interpret it correctly and draw answers and conclusions that are not intuitive. And it's time we start using it. So I'm passionate, like everyone on this call, is to create a sense of urgency and get past what we see as obstacles and barriers today and start using it.
I think this pandemic was really testament to what you're saying, right? Just use the data you have, and more intelligently, that far supersedes getting a lot more data. And Robert?
Yeah, so I think I agree with what everybody else has said. I think one of the most important values of AI is in helping us make better decisions, right? So the potential, the really intriguing potential that we can get from AI is this notion, not so much of, making the right decision or decision support, but augmenting our capacity to make the right decision. And I think we all know that, physicians are fallible, that they are prone to error, that, a lot of bad things can happen because of the decisions we make. And hopefully with AI, we can enter into a new phase of medicine where most of the time we get it right, we make the right decisions. So I think this is really, really exciting to me.
Well, I think as I always say, we learn a lot about ourselves and our fallibility when we work with a machine. I think I learned so much about how I practice. Babak, did you have your hand up for another word?
Yeah, so, I think just want to say that what we learned from COVID-19 pandemic is that importance of a policymaker making that decision to bring telemedicine to us. Important of policymakers on the top putting funding toward bringing even competitors like kind of a pharmaceutical competitor, Johnson & Johnson, work with other pharmaceuticals to push the drug to the
as they say,
masses.
It took a pandemic.
Yeah, so
hold on to these
So
good
I think
habits.
there's importance in educating the policymakers, and that was one of the discussion points, that we've got to educate policymakers and push this.
Well, I'm looking at my Zoom screen here. I'm awed by the creativity and the genius of this group, and I'm really thankful that all of you could spend half a day with us here, and we'll look forward to a very productive tomorrow. So we'll see you tomorrow. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for your
Bye-bye.
leadership.